We're now live on YouTube, Chair.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much indeed. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Northampton Borough Council Cabinet meeting, 24th of March 2021, our last Cabinet meeting. Can I start by asking if we have any apologies for absence? I don't think we have, but have I got that correct?
Correct, Chair. No apologies received.
Thank you, Ed. We have some minutes to approve. Those are minutes of our last meeting on Wednesday, the 3rd of March. All members will have had a chance to have a look at those minutes. Can I ask, does anybody have any amendments or corrections they'd like to suggest?
Suppose they be agreed.
Thank you very much, Phil. Is it agreed? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. That's the minutes. Now, we do have intention to hold part of this evening's meeting in private. And once again, this is something we avoid as much as we can. But sometimes there are things that we have to treat that way. On item 10, Sixfields, the update on the various enforcement recovery streams. These are more things that both the court and Deloitte, who are also dealing with part of this, have asked that some information remain not public. But in the case of good governance, it's important that it's available and shared with councillors. Item 11, proposed redevelopment of the former Avenue campus, is an administrative thing. I think Cabinet had seen all the information relating to this, but some papers were not attached to the formal agenda, so decisions were taken on that information. But for good governance, we're going to just repeat that step that was taken some time ago. Stephen will cover more about that before we go into private session. I'm not aware of any deputations or public addresses. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Does any member of the Cabinet have any declaration of interest to make on any of the items on the agenda? No. Thank you. We have. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ed. We have no issues this evening arising from overview and scrutiny committees. So we'll go straight to item 7. Item 7 is a series of steps that relate to the report in the public interest by KPMG that was recently published. It's been to this committee, it's been to council. And so the purpose of it coming to us today is because we have the final draft action plan. Members have seen it outside of this meeting. It takes in full the recommendations made by KPMG, and then it puts a response which includes response from West Northamptonshire Council and confirms the accountability for each of the ongoing next steps. So this in a way is what we're asking to do here is the process. So our recommendations are to accept the final action plan following the report in the public interest, and then to forward the final draft action plan following this meeting to West Northamptonshire Shadow to allow the successor authority, West Northamptonshire Council, to consider the future actions and how this is managed and reported on through its own governance processes and to determine them as it sees fit. And then finally, we note that the relevant notices will be published and consultations with the external auditor will be undertaken. So what we're approving here is the action plan and that process. Okay, now we have a couple of speakers, as we know, on this, so we'll go to the speakers next and then any other queries. The order I have them in is, first speaker is Councillor Stone. Danielle, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's difficult to know what to say about this, isn't it? The action plan is a statutory requirement, I understand that. And I understand that it has to be passed to the West Northants Authority, which is just about to come into being. I think my question is, how much information has that new authority had about what is going on, and how are we as councillors and how are we as residents going to be able to monitor the implementation and indeed the impact of that action plan? And I suppose crucially, we need to know what the governance arrangements are going to be going forward in terms of loans and lending money, supporting third parties. Is there something that needs to be coming from the Borough Council in terms of, you know, what really good governance is going to look like going forward? Because we can't afford for these mistakes to be repeated. So that's one question. The other question is, where has all of this left our relationship with the Football Supporters Club and with the football club? Because, you know, we've talked about the impact of the budget and the money, but we haven't really said very much about the impact it's had on our relationship with those two bodies.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to comment on that before we bring in our next speaker, Councillor Beardsworth. I think, although I have to be honest, some of these questions are wide of the issue that's in the report. In terms of how do we monitor this, I mean, this is a report of the public interest. These are quite rare, and all councils, whether they have a public interest report regarding their activity or whether it's about their predecessors' activity, take it really seriously. I know that for a fact. I know that from all the discussions with our own officers and indeed with those in the West. This is really, really a serious thing, and that's why we've taken it seriously as we have. So as a consequence of that, I think it remains something that will be firmly implanted on all of the senior officers' minds in the new unitary. I do think that as a result of this, with the governance corrections we've made, our governance has become at MBC pretty good. And we do know that on the specific issue of loans, it was tested when we looked at the loan process with the Saints, who came to this meeting to make representation about that, but then subsequently didn't need the facility. We have to ensure that those same standards are maintained. And I think that's the role for all of us who come from MBC, where I firmly believe our governance is fairly good now. Whether we are part of an administration, we've got the shadow, the remaining month, the first month of the council, whether each or every one of us here is successful in being elected and becomes part of an opposition or becomes part of an administration, we need to absolutely ensure that people don't forget the mistakes and the implications of those mistakes through this process that we have more painfully been through. And I think we can be assured that officers feel that way. But I feel a bit like governance now, doing things publicly, full discussions and public meetings is a part of my DNA, and I'm sure that goes for everybody who regularly attends these meetings. We just have to keep that pressure up. I think that's probably all we can say, really, isn't it? But I would hope that the seriousness of a public interest report will mean that will always be the case, that it'll never be far from being referenced. The Constitution has been very carefully looked at, and that's included input from all councils, including this council, being able to, through its members and officers, being able to have a serious input, and I have a high degree of confidence in that. So I'm hopeful that will happen. With the Supporters Trust and the football club, I would say relations are fairly good. We know that any further discussions around development with the football club have to be on the basis of this very report, and so that's an absolute underlying principle to any discussions that we have been seeking to have with the football club, and that needs to continue into the unitary. On the basis of that, I think the relationship is good, and indeed with the Supporters Trust, who of course were quite vocal on the impact of the mistakes that were made through this. We have a dialogue with the Supporters Trust whenever they wish. So I would say on balance it's fairly positive. They went off a bit like a rocket and misjudged some of the situation before, and it was slightly uncomfortable that they sent out publicity that indicated the council was about to do things that it wasn't. But nevertheless, I think the relationship's recovered, and I would I'm going back some 6 or 8 months or more now. I would say that we have a good relationship with the Supporters Trust. From my own personal perspective, the door is always open to speak with them. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bearsworth, Sally, you're next.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Chair. I think the main drive of my statement tonight is how can we prevent this sort of thing happening again. You know, we have a governance thing, a document that we're supposed to adhere to, and we keep calling it a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. It was something driven through by certain people that were in charge at that time. And I just want to make, you know, if we have a governance thing, why wasn't due diligence done? Why wasn't questions asked? Why did the cabinet at that time allow a meeting to last 3 minutes, never ask any questions and allow it to happen? you know, a lot of people deny knowledge of it on the cabinet. How can that be? You know, I've been a portfolio holder. We shared all our information with each other. We asked each other's questions at the cabinet to enlighten not only ourselves, but to the general public as well. So I'm just very, very concerned that if this has happened once, it could happen again if we've got the wrong people in place. And we really, really need to make sure that we have people in place that will ask the questions, demand answers, and make sure that this isn't ever happen again, because this money could have been put to so many good purposes. And everybody is unhappy because we've lost the money, the club hasn't got its stand, and it's a stalemate at the moment with the new owners. So it's an awful situation to be in, and I'm hopeful that West Northants can sort it out. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'll just briefly respond to that. If you don't mind me saying, I agree with all your points, but I think they've been made many times over now, and there's nothing new in what you say. This, the seriousness of this has been the biggest issue, I think, that's been to be dealt with, and as a cloud over all the work we've done in the last few years. So I'm absolutely with you there. And I think the answer is, as well as knowing that we have to ensure in future we're working with the most professional officers who are absolutely comfortable in the governance that we're doing, and that our relationships are such that there's no pressure on officers, and that our processes are right. And albeit that we're enthusiastic to move ahead quickly, we have to take the time to have full decisions. My, as you know, attitude is the better meeting is the one with the longer discussion and the chance for people to participate. And I hope that's been a trademark of these meetings over the last few years. And then finally, it's for us who may be councillors or may aspire to be councillors in the future to make sure we keep that pressure up, I think, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask, thanks, Sally. Any member of the cabinet have any other comments or question on this, or are we comfortable with what the next steps are? Thank you. In which case, if I may, I'll direct your attention to the recommendations, as always, at section 2. And I just ask if I can, please, for you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations. Is that agreed?
Great.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That takes us on to item 8, which is Vulcan Works fit out, and that's with Tim. No speakers, Tim. Over to you.
Right, thanks very much, Leader. Really good news to come at our swan song, I think. This project has gone very well, slightly delayed by COVID, but not to any great extent. And we're now at the point of letting, or daring to let, the contract for the fit out of the nearly completed building. And that is what is set out here. There are really two things here. One is to approve the fit out works that are required and to draw down £670,000 for that work. The second strand is an additional £500,000, all this money coming from the development pool, and that is to cover the additional costs of roof works on the oldest part of the building, where a number of defects were uncovered at the time of construction when they started dismantling the very old building, and that has to be dealt with. The progress is really good. The two new build buildings are nearly at a stage of the paint being dry. The remaining buildings are coming along well, and you'll see on, well, I've got unnumbered pages on my report, but at paragraph 3.1.10, the timetable for setting out the works, dealing with everything, to appoint the contractor, and then have everything ready for completion in October. And that will run alongside the appointment of the operator, so that everything is ready with an operator and a fully fitted building in October. The recommendations are quite lengthy. There are 6 of them. I've touched on the ones concerning the money, but then there are delegations to appoint the contractor and deal with the procurement. And you'll see that those are delegated to officers and a cabinet member whose titles may change, and in the case of the cabinet member or the responsible person, the body may change during the next month or so, but the delegation will, as I understand it, pass seamlessly to the Shadow Authority and ultimately to West Northamptonshire Council. The recommendations are set out, really good progress, and this one of our most exciting projects for years, which is going to be a fantastic asset to the cultural quarter and to the whole town and area. Recommendations, happy to answer any questions anyone may have, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Does anybody wish to raise any questions on this or make any observations?
Just for clarification, Chair, Tim referred to paragraph 3.1.10. I'm afraid on my report, I've got two paragraphs 3.1.10.
Yes, yeah, me too, actually.
One on
Me too.
page 17, one on page 18. So just to draw that to everybody's attention.
And I'm talking
Tim was
about
talking
the
about
one
the-
that is headed the next steps for the fit out works, and then shows a table with
Yeah.
various dates and milestones on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but there is one before that on page 17.
I haven't got that. I wasn't blessed with any papers, so I've got what I printed off from the website.
Very good.
Excellent report though, Chair.
Yeah.
Isn't it just? Isn't it just? Very exciting to see the
Really
the progress
exciting.
being made.
Yeah.
Fully agree with that. Any other comments or observations at all?
Just remember to invite me to the party. That's all I ask, Chairman.
Fantastic. Yep. So in which case, recommendations as always at section 2. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations, please? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Staying with Tim, next one is yours as well. Again, no speakers registered, Tim. This is the bike park, and particularly contractor procurement.
Yep. Really quite a contrast, I think, isn't it, from the town centre to the outer reaches, and an exciting use of a now disused portion of the golf course. Really exciting. It's an area that's fallen into disuse and has become quite wild. There are problems in adjoining areas with cycling conflicting with other rural uses, and so being able to have this dedicated facility is going to be absolutely wonderful for the town and for the two-wheel population. Really a great asset. This is designed to, this report is to procure the contractor. A lot of the design work has been done, and there's now the final phase of the design work and the actual physical works to be carried out. One concern that I think you want to mention, Leader, but I'll perhaps just touch on it because we've had communication from the Northamptonshire Badger Society concerned about wildlife on the site. It has gone wilder than one would normally expect a golf course to be, and quite a lot of that wildness will stay with this use. So from the wildlife point of view, I think this use is going to be a distinct improvement on a well-manicured golf course, and is going to be a great asset for everybody. But we will make sure that that whole issue is taken into account in the design and procurement for the operation.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. I'm glad you made that point. Yeah, I was going to make exactly that point. There are a whole series of stages to this project. The in-principle confirmation of the money, now moving to more detailed design and so on. But at this point, there is a need now for a bit more local involvement and nature, which is, I've had a number of queries as the ward councillor around nature, public access and so on. It's an important factor that we know we've got to build in. But other than that, great project. Does anybody else have any other queries or comments on this at all?
Chair, I didn't ask to speak on this, but could I just ask how we're going to keep motorcycles off it?
Yeah, gladly. My understanding is that will be a part of the condition, that it has to have fencing, and where there are walkways, there have to be motorcycle barriers and so on. A really important consideration, and one raised by local residents, of course, very, very early on in the process. So I understand that it has been carefully considered. Tim, sorry I answered that. Was there anything you would add to that?
No, I mean, I must confess that I don't know much about cycling parks. I know a little bit about skate parks from experience, and certainly with skate parks, they are largely sort of self-managing and self-policing. You know, the level of activity and the type of activity is dictated by the users, and they make sure among themselves that it sticks to that. And it may well be the same case with this sort of facility.
Yeah. But you're right, though, Sally. Local residents raise that it might be off-peak times when people aren't cycling. You know, it could be late nights and all sorts of things. So the precautions will be put in there, motorcycle pathway barriers and so on. Very good. Okay. Yes. Any further comments at all or questions? Oh, Phil.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chair, there are actually, as we know, 2 footpaths that cross the site. And they are totally separate from the cycle tracks, and none of the proposed cycle tracks cross the public footpaths. So, you know, there will be no conflict between people using those footpaths and the cyclists on the tracks, as long as they're on the proper tracks, of course. But every effort has been made there to keep them totally separate. And I'm pleased that the plan that we've got before us tonight reflects that.
Just one final point, perhaps, Leader. You can see from the report that you've actually got to go quite a long way to find a similar facility, which will turn out to be of a similar quality. And that really is a great asset for us in this area, I think.
It's interesting, actually. It reminds me of the conversation we were having with the university, where they see the huge amount of leisure activity with whitewater and so many other things, pinnacle climbing along the south of the town, creation of the concept of an activity quarter as part of the promotion to attracting students and so on. There is a great leisure offer along there, isn't there? Yeah. I slightly claimed ownership as the ward councillor. Of course, it is called the course is called the Hardingstone 9. The residents of Hardingstone see it out their window, but of course it is in fact in the Delapre ward. My apology to my councillor colleagues from Delapre. But that clarified, if I may, I draw your attention back to the recommendations, which as always are at section 2. If I may just ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations. Is agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. So this then takes us on to the Sixfields report, update on the various enforcement and recovery streams, which is item 10. Purpose for bringing this is that we have not had an update for a little while. It is fair to say that the Cabinet, at any time they wish, of course, can ask for an update. We have had informal updates at our weekly Executive Programme Board meeting. We felt it was important to bring an update to the Cabinet. Now, some of the information, as I say, will have to be dealt with privately, because it is important, we feel, the whole report is saying that Cabinet involvement throughout is crucial. So that's why we want to make sure, one of the reasons we want to make sure that Cabinet has the full update. However, given the Court and Deloitte's preference that some information is not shared publicly, we will be going into private session. There's a number of different strands to this activity, and this report covers where we are with an update on liquidation against 2 directors, Cardoza's, against a limited company, then describes sale of property, private property, a bankruptcy, and then liquidation of a company called First Land, which is being dealt with by Deloitte. Summarises the amounts, but finally points out, and I think this is an important one, that obviously there is an ongoing police investigation And whilst the amounts collected so far may be considered to have been fairly hard work, albeit they have recognised the success, and you'll see they've gone far-reaching into residential properties owned by family members of those involved in this issue. So they have been far-reaching. They don't go anywhere near yet reclaiming that full amount of money. The police investigation, of course, is ongoing, and of course, as part of that, we would hope that to add to that will be a significant proceeds of crime contribution to also repay the money missing from the public purse in Northampton. The report is what it is, and I'm happy then just to take speakers, and very happy, of course, to answer as best I can any particular questions. If there are more detailed questions, Francis couldn't be with us, unfortunately, because of a bereavement today. We have Laurie, perhaps between us we can answer or get back to people with formal written answers. Two speakers. First one is Councillor Stone. Danielle, over to you.
Thank you. Leader, I remember really, really well the meeting, the cabinet meeting, where the recovery of the monies was discussed and the action taken against the Cardozas and Grossman was discussed. And I have to say, when I heard it, I was really glad it wasn't me having to make the decision about whether to go along with the plan, because it seemed to me, you know, to be a really precarious plan where we were going to be spending more money without any certainty of the outcome. And, you know, the only beneficiaries there were the lawyers that we were engaging. And I still am not sure whether that was the right course of action. You know, there's a difference between wanting to be punitive, and I totally and absolutely buy that one. You know, we're all really angry, we want justice. But then there's prudence in terms of, you know, spending more public funds for an uncertain outcome. And I just wonder what the reflection on all of that is now, and whether you think it would have been more prudent to wait for the outcome of the public interest report and the police action.
I think the answer is definitely not. Definitely not. There was a certain time factor to it. I think the bit I would say is, I mean, you know, and I agree with so much what you said there, because there's a lot of emotion in this, isn't there? We all of us, and perhaps more so for me as a member of the administration that was on watch at the time, get challenged over it and so on, and people feel angry, whether that's because they're just a member of the public, council taxpayer, whether that's because they are a football fan. Many football fans are very angry, and they express that emotion. And one not long ago said to me, well, surely there was never any doubt that you were going to pursue this. And I had to say to him, there was a doubt. Every single time we took a cabinet decision, it was not a fait accompli. We had to weigh it up properly. It'd be easy to be driven by it, by emotion, wouldn't it? We had to assess it. The meetings you refer to, yes, we've had cabinet meetings here. We also had a member briefing, didn't we? Where I seem to remember we brought along the gentleman from Osborne Clark, the solicitors, who have been closely involved. And I remember trying to get a feel for the room, if I can say, and I know that was attended not just by Conservative councillors, but by opposition councillors of both parties, were well attended. And I felt a certain consensus that overall, given the challenges, the risks that were attached, it was felt that on balance, the answer was to proceed and take this action. But we have on a number of occasions had to take a fresh decision. Do we continue action? And it's only been based on those decisions. To relentlessly say whatever the cost, we'll pursue it would have been the wrong thing. But it is a very difficult situation. I do think there are some aspects of this that in a situation like this, I think money starts to disappear and people perhaps kick over the traces of things. So I think there was a need to move fairly promptly. And I think I would feel more uncomfortable sitting here now having to say to residents of the town that we didn't do anything to pursue their money. But it's not cut and dry. It's not simple, is it? It's not an easy one. We also have registered Councillor Beardsworth. Sally, over to you.
Leader, sorry, leader, but the thing is that we haven't recovered it. That's the point. We haven't. So we've spent a lot more money and we haven't got anything much back from it, you know. I just wonder whether there are other mechanisms that could have been employed.
I think I've stood behind what we did do. I just need to clarify that. I think what you're saying is that you wouldn't have pursued it, Danielle. Is that right? I stand behind the decisions we've taken.
I want the culprits pursued, and I want the police case to be concluded, and so I want recompense for the public purse. And I want, you know, the people who did this to the town to be punished. Absolutely. And that's politicians, I'm afraid, as well as, you know, people associated with receiving the loan and not paying it back. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, would there have been a better way of pursuing recovery and pursuing justice? And would have it been better to have hung that on the police case? Because then we would have, you know, there would have been people who'd been identified as the criminals in that case. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we know that the police case is yet to come to that fuller result. We understand they're progressing. And we're passing files to the Crown Prosecution Service, but we know that is just a time. In the meantime, we had a choice to wait for that or to press on. We chose to press on. I think even in hindsight, the result have turned out to be consistent with the risks anticipated. It's not wildly different from that. We knew with any of these actions that it could yield nothing or next to nothing, or possibly could have yielded more. I don't think we can be totally surprised at the results. And I don't think there's any line of this that people would feel comfortable if we hadn't pursued, to be honest, albeit the fact that, you know, it is so far, it has not been possible to recover anywhere near the full amount of money that was taken that was put towards these costs. I don't think in hindsight we think of anything else. I'll just pause for a moment and see whether either George or Laurie want to make any further comments at all. But I think from my perspective, probably on balance, there wouldn't have been another way of doing this. We had to pursue the lines we did. Did either want to comment? If not, I'm happy to move on to our next speaker.
Yeah, no, I've no comment to make because I haven't been involved in this issue, Chairman. No. So, but if Danielle would like a fuller answer, I'll certainly take this up with Francis.
Yeah, that would be helpful. That would be helpful. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you very much. Right, if we may then, let's move on to our next speaker, which is Councillor Beardsworth. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. In 2010-11, before we lost power, Isabel Proctor was our director, and the Cardozas visited us and spoke to David Perkins, who was then our Director of Finance, Portfolio for Finance, and put a case to him. And they said, this doesn't stack up, go away, it's not sensible, there's no way you can pay it back. So they went away and we left a file with the new administration to say that this has happened and why we had turned it down. And we got pilloried in the press by the Tory running up to the election saying we weren't helping the sports clubs. But we had tried and we'd looked at it and sorted it was a no-winner. So we did that. Now we've got a court case looming that's taken 7 years to get going. 7 years. I could be dead before it goes to court. I mean, it's just ridiculous how long it is taking. And I know we've had the pandemic for the last year, but before then it was really dragging. It was supposed to go to the CPS. They said they wanted 30 people to look at it. And stop me if I say anything I shouldn't. That's all I'm saying at the moment, if I'm on open time. And I'm just saying that, hang on, I think my television's going to go off in a minute. Hold on. I've got to work out how to do it. No, can't do it. Anyway, if I go off, I'll come back on. Anyway, what I'm saying is that we really need to know how much it has cost us altogether. How much have we recovered? And when is it going to trial? Those are the three questions that the people most want to know. And could you possibly answer that in the closed part of the agenda, please?
Okay, I think taking the 2 points again, look, if I can be blunt, you have told us many times about the Liberal Democrat thing. It's an opportunity you take each time the subject
I know.
rises. In terms of the information, that the information on the recovery is contained in this report and indeed in the private report as well. We'll seek to answer any other questions at that point. And there probably is, if there's more specific information that you need, we could probably get that to you that's not contained. I don't think we've got our total cost. What we've got is total recovery, I think, here, isn't it?
Yeah.
But happy to provide that separately. Yeah, okay. Nobody's trying to disregard, just to wrap up this issue, nobody's trying to disregard. We've already talked about the importance of this in the previous item, the earlier item. This is about the recovery. I think probably we've done what we've done, but we stand by and we're reporting to the world here what we have or perhaps haven't recovered. Recommendation is that, being an update, is that we simply note this report. So I don't think on that basis any need to ask for your agreement. Are there any further queries from Cabinet members at all on this?
Can I just say, Jonathan, I think you're right and proper to go ahead with pursuing everything. I think I agreed with that on the day, because the people need to know that we need to try and put this right.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Sally. Thank you for saying that. My point earlier to Danielle was just it reminded me that we can't ever automatically just do something. I share your anger at the whole thing, but each time we take considered decision. Thank you very much. Any further queries on this at all? No, jolly good. In which case, our next item then is the proposed redevelopment of the former Avenue campus to provide affordable housing. Stephen, do you just want to talk us through again where we are with this? Because we have seen this before, I think, and perhaps a better explanation than mine on the private session thing. Or is there any, or do you want to recap the thing again? Over to you anyway, however you feel it's best played.
Certainly don't intend to recap the whole of the original report, which went out on Zoom anyway at the time. We made the decision on the 17th of February. Tonight we're being asked to affirm that decision, taking into account a financial report and a plan that should have been attached to that those cabinet papers, but what wasn't. But these were both papers that we'd already had access to, for purposes of governance, as you explained earlier, we need to revisit it and affirm our decision in private, taking into account the financial paper and the other document.
Yeah, thank you. And worth pointing out that Cabinet members had all that information prior at the report review stage, so they weren't making the decision without it as such. So we'll therefore, if we will, go into private session, and just also to clarify, Laurie, you might be the chap to clarify for me. When we're meeting face to face, we then, should they wish to, let people back in the room. We go into private session now. Do we go back into public session to confirm any decisions that have been taken based on reviewing this information?
Yes, just to reaffirm them, and that's about all, Mr. Chairman. I think you've got it right.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. In which case we'll go into private session. I don't think that means excluding anybody who's on the screen, but